What does it take to ground a global airline? A blizzard? A volcanic ash cloud? A crippling cyber attack? You're wrong on all counts. All it takes is one entitled flight attendant, one open-handed slap, and one passenger who holds the kill switch. This is the true-life story of Velocity Air Flight 217. It's the story of how a single act of bigotry in Seat 2A didn't just end a career, it triggered a 48-second phone call that bankrupted a $4 billion corporation. Stick with me, because the karma that hits in this story is swift, brutal, and absolutely unforgettable. The cabin of Velocity Air Flight 217 was a pressurized tube of simmering grievances. The Monday morning 8 a.m. flight from JFK to LAX was the flagship route, the billion-dollar baby, and it was always oversold, overstressed, and overcaffeinated. The air, already recycled 3 times, hummed with the whine of the APU and the friction of too many people in too small a space. In Seat 2A, Marcus Thorne was trying to be invisible. He was a man who had built a $10 billion company, Aerotech Solutions, precisely by understanding the complex, invisible systems that ran the world. And to understand them, you had to watch them. This was not a pleasure trip. He was, in effect, a secret shopper. Velocity Air was 6 months delinquent on an $80 million license payment for the AeroLink software that ran their entire operation, from navigation and fuel calculus to booking and gate management. Their CEO, Thomas Bishop, had been dodging his calls. So, Marcus was flying the airline to see, firsthand, the state of the company he was propping up. Was it simple cash flow trouble, or was it rot? His laptop was open, its glow shielded by a privacy screen. He wasn't just checking emails. He was in a secure, encrypted diagnostic portal, monitoring the real-time performance of Flight 217's avionics. He saw a minor, recurring flag in the fuel balance sensor. Nothing dangerous, but it was sloppy. It meant maintenance crews were pencil-whipping their reports. He wore a simple, charcoal grey travel hoodie, Bose headphones, and a pair of worn Allbirds. He looked like any other tech bro, a fact that seemed to infuriate the senior flight attendant, Karen Miller. Karen Miller was a woman who felt she was owed by the airline she had given 25 years to, the airline that had passed her over for a management position 3 times, owed by the passengers, whose comfort she saw as a personal inconvenience. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, weaponized bun, and her smile was a slash of Velocity red lipstick that didn't touch her eyes. She had already made her presence known. "Sir, that bag does not fit. It's not a personal item if it has its own zip code," she'd snapped at a young man in coach. "Mum, you'll have to take the child off your lap. Yes, I know he's asleep. It's FAA regulations. It's not my problem," she'd barked at a tired-looking mother. Now she was in first class, and her eyes landed on Marcus. He was a problem she could feel. He was black, he was in 2A, and he was dressed like he was going to the gym. Her internal, prejudiced calculus classified him instantly. Discount ticket. Problematic. The final phase of boarding was underway when the real incident began. A large, red-faced man in a Velocity Platinum polo shirt, let's call him Chad, barged his way from the back of the first-class cabin, where his seat was. He'd clearly been told the main bins were full and was now poaching space up front. He spotted the bin directly above Marcus, which contained only Marcus's small canvas laptop bag and a jacket. With a grunt, Chad grabbed his overstuffed roller bag, the kind that is technically carry-on, but universally despised, and began to shove it into the bin. Marcus heard the sickening crunch of carbon fiber and plastic before he even looked up. The man's bag was crushing the corner of his laptop bag, which contained not just his laptop, but a $50,000 piece of proprietary diagnostic hardware. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice calm, clear, and projecting just enough. "Your bag is crushing mine. Could you please adjust it?" Chad ignored him, putting his shoulder into the bag to force the bin lid shut. "Sir," Marcus said, a little louder, standing up. "Stop. You're damaging my property." Chad turned, his face a mask of platinum entitlement. "Find a flight attendant, buddy. This bin is for first class." "I am in first class," Marcus said. "This is my assigned bin. Your bag is the problem, not mine." This was the moment Karen Miller chose to intervene. She didn't address Chad, who was huffing and puffing. She moved past him and stood directly over Marcus, who was still half standing in his seat well. "Sir, you need to sit down. We are in the final stages of closing the door," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "Ma'am, I'm happy to sit down as soon as this passenger removes his bag from on top of mine," Marcus said, pointing. Karen didn't even look. Her eyes were fixed on Marcus. "I don't have time for this. If you can't find a place for your bag, I'm going to have to check it. Now sit down." The injustice of the moment was so profound, so blatant, that the passengers around them, the hedge fund manager in 1B, the Hollywood producer in 3F, all looked up from their Wall Street journals. "That's not what's happening," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its warmth. "This passenger, who is not seated here, is forcing his bag into my bin and damaging my equipment. Are you refusing to comply with a flight attendant's directive?" Karen's voice rose, hitting that nasal, authoritarian pitch that signals a final warning. This was her favorite part. The power. "I am simply asking you to do your job," Marcus said. "Protect a passenger's property and resolve the conflict he started." "That's it," Karen snapped. "I'm not going to be threatened by people like you. You're off this flight." "People like me," Marcus repeated, the words hanging in the stale air. Karen saw her opening. He had talked back. He was, in her twisted logic, a threat. She was stressed, she was angry, and she was, at her core, a bully, fueled by a toxic cocktail of 25 years of resentment and a single ugly prejudice. She did the unthinkable. She drew back her hand. "You are a problem," she hissed, and she slapped him. Crack. The sound was not a movie sound. It was a wet, sharp, disgusting sound. The sound of flesh and bone impacting flesh and bone. It echoed in the small, enclosed space. The plane went silent. A baby in coach, sensing the sudden vacuum of sound, let out a wail. Marcus Thorne did not flinch. He did not yell. He did not move. He very, very slowly raised one hand to his left cheek, where a red mark was already blooming. He turned his head and looked directly into Karen Miller's eyes. The analytical part of his brain registered her dilated pupils, the slight tremor in her hand, the sudden, shocking realization of what she had just done. In the bulkhead seat of Economy Plus, just behind the curtain, a young woman named Sarah Jensen, a travel vlogger known as Jet Set Sarah, had her phone out. She'd been vlogging her How to Get a Free Upgrade video, and the lens was pointed right through the gap in the curtain. She hadn't stopped recording. Her phone's high-definition lens was focused, clear as day, on Marcus's face, on Karen's hand, and on the stunned, horrified faces of the other first-class passengers. Karen, realizing she had crossed a line she could never uncross, stumbled backward, but her training kicked in. She had to be the victim. He threatened me! He threatened me!" she shrieked, fumbling for the intercom. "Security! I need security at the gate! I have a violent passenger!" "No," Marcus said. His voice was terrifyingly quiet, but it cut through her panic. "You don't." He sat down, calmly, and reached into the pocket of his hoodie. He pulled out his phone. He ignored the gasps, the whispers of, "Did you see that?" Karen scoffed, her bravado returning, mistaking his calm for surrender. "Who are you calling? Your lawyer? It's too late for that. You're going to jail." Marcus held up one finger to silence her, a simple, declarative gesture of such absolute authority that she actually stopped talking. He unlocked his phone and tapped a single favorite on his contact list. The contact was listed as AC. The call connected in one ring. "This is Marcus Thorne." The cabin was so quiet that the man in 1B could hear the tinny voice on the other end of the line. "Mr. Thorne, this is an unscheduled call. Alex here. Is everything all right? The diagnostic—" "Alex," Marcus interrupted, his voice a flat, cold sheet of ice. "Execute Protocol 0 Delta. Authorization code 919 Alpha Tango. Effective immediately." There was a sharp, strangled gasp on the other end of the line, a shuffling of papers, a frantic click of a keyboard. My God, sir. Protocol 0 Delta. That's the Covenant clause. That is a full, network-wide license revocation. It's not a suspension, it's a termination." "That is correct," Marcus said, his eyes finding Karen Miller's. For which client?" Alex asked, his voice trembling, already knowing the answer. Marcus held his gaze on Karen. "Velocity Air, all hubs, all systems, now. Sir, that's 9 major airports. JFK, LAX, O'Hare, DRW, Atlanta, Miami, SFO, SeaTac, and Heathrow. It will ground their entire global fleet. It's catastrophic. It will bankrupt them in an hour." "I am aware of what it does," Marcus said. "You have my authorization. Execute." "Affirmative," Alex said, his training kicking in. "Executing 0 Delta on the Velocity Air global network. Revoking all software and navigation licenses. 3, 2, 1. Done. The license is revoked. Their systems are offline. God help them, sir." Marcus hung up. The entire call had lasted 48 seconds. Karen Miller laughed. A short, ugly barking sound. "What was that? Calling your little friends? I told you security is on its way. You are so—" Bing bong. The PA system crackled to life. It wasn't security. It was the captain's voice, and the smooth, buttery, "welcome aboard" tone was gone. He sounded like he was going to be sick. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Harrison. We seem to be having a major system outage. Our navigation is offline. Our gate comms are down. The in-flight screens." As he said it, every screen in the cabin, the seatback TVs, the main bulkhead monitor, flickered. The "Welcome Aboard" map vanished. It was replaced by a simple, terrifying message in a default font. "Aerotech Solutions. License revoked. Code ZD 919AT. All services suspended. A collective gasp went through the plane. "What the hell?" The captain's voice came over the PA, clearly a hot mic. "Operations, what is going on? My screens are dead. I'm getting—" "Wait. Oh my God." The mic went silent for 10 agonizing seconds. The plane, still attached to the gate, was a pressure cooker. Bing bong. "This is Captain Harrison again. All passengers must deplane, immediately. I've just been informed by our operations center that Velocity Air, all of Velocity Air, has been indefinitely suspended from operations at all our hubs. I don't know what's going on. Please deplane in an orderly fashion. This is not a drill. We are grounded." The cabin exploded. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was panic. Karen Miller's face had gone from smug to confused to the color of wet cement. She looked at the cockpit door, then back at Marcus, who was now calmly closing his laptop and zipping his canvas bag, the bag that had started it all. "What did you do?" she whispered, the words barely audible. "What did you do?" "Me," Marcus said, standing up. "I'm just a passenger you wanted to have removed." He picked up his bag. He paused as he was level with her. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am the founder and CEO of Aerotech Solutions." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She knew that name. It was on their training manuals. It was on the software. "Velocity Air," Marcus continued, his voice for her ears only, "runs on my software. The navigation that gets you from A to B. The booking system that sold you this ticket. The gate management that connects this plane to the terminal. The logistics that schedule your maintenance. Everything. As of 1 minute ago, your airline no longer has a license to use it. You personally, are the material breach of contract I've been waiting for." A gate agent, his face pale and slick with sweat, ran onto the plane, shoving past the deplaning passengers. "Karen, what happened? The system it's just gone. It's all red. O'Hare is dark. LAX is dark. They're saying every single flight is grounded. They're saying it's 0 Delta." Karen stared at Marcus, her world spinning off its axis. Marcus looked at her, his face devoid of all emotion. "You are being sued for assault. Your employer is being sued for gross negligence. And your airline, well, I think your airline is about to go out of business." He walked past her, the first person to deplane. As he stepped into the jet bridge, he saw Sarah Jensen, the blogger, holding her phone, her hand over her mouth. "Did you get all that?" Marcus asked her, gesturing back toward the cabin. She nodded, speechless. "Good," Marcus said. "Post it. Post all of it. Tag Velocity Air, and tag their CEO, Thomas Bishop." The scene at JFK's Terminal 4 was a perfect, real-time painting of corporate death. The bright, cheerful, on-time signs above the 20 Velocity Air gates all flickered at once. They didn't just turn to delayed, they went blank. Then, in stark, red, digital letters, one word appeared on every single screen: suspended. A unified groan of 10,000 people went up. Gate agents, their tablets and computers all displaying the same license revoked message, were instantly mobbed. "What's going on? I have a connection. This is my mother's funeral." The agents, their digital lifelines cut, could only stammer, "We're experiencing a system-wide outage. Please wait." Back on Flight 217, the 2 Port Authority police officers who had been summoned by Karen's violent passenger call finally boarded. They were met not by a violent passenger, but by the captain, his face grim, his hat in his hand. "Officer," Captain Harrison said, "I'm not sure what she called you for, but that flight attendant, Karen Miller, just assaulted a passenger. And that passenger, I think he just shut us down." "He threatened me!" Karen shrieked, finally finding her voice. She was backed into the galley, a cornered animal. "He was non-compliant. I have the video," a voice said. Sarah Jensen was standing there, her phone held up like a shield. "I have the whole thing, the unedited, 10-minute clip. It shows you harassing him. It shows the other passenger damaging his bag. It shows you ignoring him, and it shows you slapping him. Clear as day. I'm already sending it to your former bosses." Karen Miller's world, which for 25 years had been defined by the absolute petty authority of her uniform, simply evaporated. The officers looked at the captain, then at Sarah, then at Karen. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said, his hand resting on her arm. "You can't do this," she shrieked, the mask of professionalism gone, revealing the raw, ugly entitlement beneath. "I am the authority on this aircraft. Not anymore, you're not," the officer said, guiding her firmly into the jet bridge, her shrieks echoing down the tunnel. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne was already in a black Escalade, speeding away from the terminal. His phone was ringing so hard it was vibrating off the console. The first call he took was from his legal team, headed by Ben Jacobs. "The video is up," Ben said, his voice tense but excited. "A vlogger named Jet Set Sarah. It's got 100,000 views in the last 10 minutes. The title is Velocity Air Attendant Slaps Passenger. Did he ground the airline? Exclusive video. It's perfect." "Good," Marcus said, rubbing his cheek. The adrenaline was fading, and it was beginning to sting. "The second thing," Ben said, "is that Thomas Bishop's office has called me 17 times in the last 5 minutes. His personal assistant is, I believe, hysterical is the correct term." "Let him call," Marcus said. "Marcus, the optics. They'll say this is disproportionate. They'll say you're a tyrant." "Is it?" Marcus interrupted, his voice cold. "Ben, pull up the file. How many formal complaints have we lodged with Velocity in the last year? The ones about random security checks on our own non-white technicians at their hubs?" 14, Ben said, his keyboard clacking. "And how many times have we sent them reports on their corporate culture issues, as per our professional conduct clause?" 6, Ben affirmed. "They never responded." "And what else, Ben?" "The money," Ben said quietly. "The money," Marcus affirmed. "They are $80 million in arrears. They've been dodging our collections team, claiming cash flow issues, while Bishop just bought a new Gulfstream. They are in breach of payment, and as of 20 minutes ago, they are in material breach of the Covenant Clause." "The Covenant Clause," Ben said, almost smiling. "The one Bishop's legal team called sentimental nonsense during negotiations." "The very one," Marcus said. "The clause that states our software license is contingent on them maintaining a safe, professional, and non-discriminatory environment. The clause that states a public, discriminatory or violent act by a company representative constitutes an immediate, incurable material breach. They broke the contract, Ben. In every way. The slap was just the most public." "So what do I tell Bishop's team when they call for the 18th time?" "Tell them," Marcus said, looking out the window as the gleaming glass and steel prison of Terminal 4 receded, "to check their contract, and then tell them to check Twitter." The emergency boardroom at Velocity Air's 90th floor, glass and steel headquarters in Dallas was a tomb. CEO Thomas Bishop, a man whose silver hair, $10,000 Brioni suits, and sociopathic charm usually exuded untouchable power, was standing at the head of a 40-foot mahogany table. His face was a mask of purple apoplectic rage. "What do you mean he turned us off?" he roared, slamming his fist on the table so hard a crystal water glass shattered. A terrified VP of operations, a man named Henderson, flinched. "Sir, it's Aerotech. Their software isn't just part of our system. It is our system. The planes. They can't get clearance to push back. Their transponders can't talk to the towers. The towers can't talk to our gates. The logistics system that routes fuel trucks. It's just gone. It thinks all our planes are just gone. We can't sell tickets. We can't check people in. We can't refund tickets. We can't fly. London Heathrow is diverting 30 of our transatlantic flights. O'Hare is a parking lot. As of 9:02 a.m. Eastern, Velocity Air doesn't exist." "This is a breach of contract," Bishop screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "This is the most illegal, anti-competitive, monopolistic corporate warfare I have ever seen. Get our lawyers. Get an injunction. I will own Marcus Thorne. I will have him in jail. I will—" "Sir," The voice was a quiet, weary pinprick in Bishop's balloon of rage. It was the company's general counsel, a small, precise man named David Patel. "What?" Bishop snapped. Patel slid a tablet across the table. "You need to see this. It was posted 45 minutes ago. It's at 4 million views. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are both on hold. They say our stock has been halted, pending an explanation." Bishop snatched the tablet. He watched the video. He saw the polite, calm passenger in the hoodie. He saw Karen Miller, his senior attendant, his employee, her face twisted in that familiar, ugly sneer he'd seen her use on junior staff. He heard the racist-coded language, "People like you," causing a problem. And then he heard the slap. He watched it 3 times. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly grey. "Who?" he whispered. "In the name of God, did she slap?" "That, sir," Patel said, "is Marcus Thorne, CEO and sole proprietor of Aerotech Solutions." The room was silent. You could hear the 90th floor wind whistling against the glass. Bishop knew the name. It was the name on the $80 million invoice he had been using as a coaster. It was the name of the man he'd dismissed as a tech nerd who didn't understand real business. "And it gets worse," Patel continued, pulling up a new document on his own tablet. "I've been on the phone with Aerotech's counsel, Ben Jacobs. They're not claiming breach of contract. We are in breach." "The payments?" Bishop waved a dismissive hand. "We'll pay them. It's a liquidity." "No, sir, not just the payments, though that alone gives them cause. Do you remember the contract negotiation 2 years ago? Section 12, Clause B. The covenant clause?" Bishop stared at him. "I have the email, sir," Patel said, his voice flat. "I advised you that the clause was unusual and potentially dangerous. I advised we fight it. You, and I quote, told me to stop being a wet blanket, and that it was just some hippy-dippy HR nonsense, and to let the nerd have his virtue signal." "Your words, sir," Patel read from the screen. "Client agrees to maintain a safe, professional, and non-discriminatory environment for all passengers, partners, and employees. Failure to do so, particularly in a manner that publicly damages the integrity of the service or the Aerotech brand, shall be considered an incurable material breach, granting Aerotech Solutions the right to, and I quote, immediate and total termination of all services and licenses." Bishop sank into his chair. He had built his airline by bullying vendors, cutting costs, and fostering a cutthroat, customer is usually wrong culture. He had laughed at Marcus Thorne's woke contract clause. Now that clause was a gun to his head, and Karen Miller had just pulled the trigger. "The video, sir," Patel said, "is the public damage. The assault is the incurable material breach. We have no injunction. We have no legal standing. We have nothing. They're right." "Get him on the phone," Bishop whispered, his voice hoarse. "Get Marcus Thorne on the phone. Get him whatever he wants. Money. A board seat. My firstborn. Just get him on the phone." "He's not taking your call, sir," Patel said, closing his tablet. "His counsel informed me that Mr. Thorne is, and I quote, in a meeting with his new partners at Orion Air." Orion Air, their biggest competitor. It was a knife in the gut. For Karen Miller, the karma was not a slow-moving glacier, it was an explosion. She was processed at the Port Authority police station at JFK, charged with assault in the 3rd degree. The video was all the evidence they needed. She was released on her own recognizance, but the world she stepped back into, just 3 hours later, was not the one she had left. Her face was everywhere. "The $4 billion slap," the New York Post screamed. "Karen Miller, the flight attendant who grounded a global airline. She was fired before she even got home, a cold, one-sentence email from Velocity's HR department, an email that had been forwarded to every major news outlet. The Flight Attendants Union, after reviewing the video, released a scathing public statement condemning her indefensible and career-ending actions and stating they would not be representing her. She was, in a word, toxic. Her personal life imploded. Her neighbors in her quiet New Jersey suburb peered at her through their blinds as she pulled into her driveway. Her sister, who lived in Florida, stopped answering her calls. Her ex-husband's new wife posted on Facebook, "So glad I got out when I did. She was always a hateful person." She started a GoFundMe for her legal defense with the title, "Bullied by a Billionaire." It was reported and shut down by the platform for promoting hate and misinformation within an hour, but not before it had raised a total of $42. Desperate, she agreed to an exclusive interview with a local news station, convinced she could paint herself as the victim. This was her final, fatal mistake. I want people to know my side," she said, dabbing at dry eyes in her living room. He was very threatening. He was non-compliant. And in my line of work, 25 years, non-compliance is a threat. I felt I was in danger. I was just doing my job. The reporter, a sharp young woman named Maria Flores, was not having it. "Ma'am," Maria said, her voice polite but firm. "I'm looking at the video right now. He's sitting. You're standing. He asks you to resolve a dispute. You escalate. You call him people like you. And then you strike him. At what point, exactly, were you in danger?" His tone," Karen stammered. "It was aggressive." "His tone?" Maria repeated, an eyebrow raised. "He's sitting in his assigned seat, which he paid for, and you hit him. The world sees this, Mrs. Miller. They see a woman in power assaulting a black man, and then they see you claiming you were the victim." The interview was a disaster. The "I felt threatened" defense, so often used, was laid bare as a pathetic, transparent lie. Karen Miller became, overnight, the face of racial intolerance and unchecked white-collar entitlement. She lost her pension. She lost her flight benefits. She was unemployable in any service industry. Within 2 weeks, a for sale sign was on her lawn. The bank was foreclosing. The hard karma was this: a woman who derived her entire sense of self-worth from the authority of her uniform and the color of her skin was stripped of both, left with nothing but the consequences of her own hatred. If Karen Miller's karma was a sudden, violent wildfire, Thomas Bishop's was the slow, crushing, and unstoppable advance of a glacier. The moment Marcus Thorne's call ended, Velocity Air's death spiral began. The first 24 hours were a financial bloodbath. The company wasn't just losing money, it was hemorrhaging it. With 300 aircraft grounded on tarmacs across 9 major hubs, the burn rate was astronomical. $10 million in the first hour, $100 million by the end of the first day, $150 million by the end of the second. The stock, when the exchanges finally unfroze it, did not just fall. It evaporated. It opened at $42.50. 7 minutes later, after a 98.4% drop, it was halted again at 0.60 cephers. It was, for all intents and purposes, worthless. But Thomas Bishop, cocooned in his 90th floor office, didn't believe he could fail. He was a creature of pure, unadulterated ego. This was just a negotiation, a hostile one, but a negotiation. He spent the next week in a desperate, humiliating frenzy, trying every door, only to find each one locked from the inside. His first call was to his lawyers, screaming for an injunction. "I want that software turned back on. This is illegal. It's monopolistic." The emergency hearing was granted. The judge, a formidable woman in the Southern District of New York, listened for 5 minutes. She watched the Jet Set Sarah video. Then she asked to see a copy of the contract. Bishop's lawyer pointed to the $80 million delinquency. "So, you weren't paying your bill, counsel?" the judge asked. "That's a simple dispute, Your Honor. It doesn't warrant—" "Then let's look at Section 12, Clause B, the Covenant Clause," the judge said, having clearly read the filing. "The contract he's citing seems to give Mr. Thorne the explicit right to terminate services in the event of, let's see, a public act of discrimination or violence by a company representative. Your flight attendant's assault, which I've just watched, seems to fit that description perfectly, wouldn't you say?" The case was thrown out in less than 10 minutes. His second attempt was technical. He got his terrified CIO on a conference call with every major tech consultant in the world. "I need a new system. I need it now. I don't care what it costs." The answers were all the same. A new, bespoke, global-scale aviation logistics and navigation suite to integrate with 300 planes, 200 of which are different models. "Sure, Mr. Bishop, we can get you a beta version in 18 months, and the price starts at $500 million upfront, in escrow." He was trapped. Aerotech wasn't a provider, it was the provider. His final, most desperate move came on day 4. In a fit of rage, he ordered his internal tech team to find a back door. "Hack your way in. Get the planes moving." This, as it turned out, was the stupidest and most illegal move of all. The moment his team tried to brute force a login, a system-wide code black alarm was triggered at Aerotech, which, per federal aviation law, was automatically forwarded to the FAA and the Department of Homeland Security. Within an hour, Thomas Bishop wasn't just the CEO of a failed airline. He was a person of interest on a federal watch list for attempting to breach secure aviation software. He was done, beaten, ruined. After a week of this, a week of his multi-billion-dollar empire rotting on tarmacs around the world, he finally got his meeting. It wasn't granted, it was given. A simple calendar invite appeared in his email. Marcus Thorne, 30 minutes, my office, tomorrow. Thomas Bishop, the man with a private Gulfstream GES 650, flew for the first time in 15 years on a competitor's airline. The humiliation was profound. He booked a ticket on Orion Air, in coach, using a personal credit card. He sat in seat 24B, a middle seat, his knees jammed against the tray table, silently fuming as the flight attendant, who was polite, professional, and smiling, asked him if he wanted the snack box. He was made to wait for 45 minutes in the lobby of Aerotech's gleaming, sustainable campus in Austin. The lobby wasn't a lobby, it was an atrium. It had living walls of green plants, a quiet, gurgling waterfall and natural sunlight. It was everything his brutalist, glass and steel Dallas headquarters was not. It was calm. It was healthy. It was, to him, infuriating. Finally, he was shown into Marcus Thorne's office. The office was minimalist, clean, and overlooked a peaceful river. Marcus was standing at the window, not in a hoodie, but in a perfectly tailored dark blue suit. He didn't turn when Bishop entered, his $10,000 Brioni suit looking slept in, his face puffy and grey. "Marcus, Mr. Thorne, thank you for seeing me," Bishop stammered, his old, booming voice now a reedy, desperate thing. Marcus turned. His face was neutral. His left cheek, where the red mark had been, was clear. "Thomas, look," Bishop said, rushing forward, his hands held out as if begging. "This has all been a catastrophic misunderstanding. A moment of madness from one rogue, hateful employee. She's been fired. She's been disgraced. We are launching a full-scale, top-to-bottom review of our culture. We have your $80 million. Right now, In fact, we have $96 million, the $80 million plus a 20% inconvenience fee. It's ready to wire, right now. Just, please, turn the system back on." He paused, trying a different tactic. "We have 10,000 employees, Marcus. Families, pilots, mechanics. They're hostages in this. They're innocent. You're killing them." Marcus let the silence hang in the air, a heavy, suffocating blanket. He walked slowly to his desk and sat on the edge, looking down at the broken man. "You're not killing them, Thomas." "You are." Marcus's voice was soft, but it was not kind. It was the voice of a surgeon explaining a terminal diagnosis. "This wasn't a misunderstanding, Thomas. It was your business model. You didn't have one rogue employee. You had a culture you built, fostered, and rewarded, a culture of bullying. You bullied your vendors. That $80 million invoice proves it. You bullied your employees. I've seen the turnover rates. And you bullied your customers because you thought you were the only game in town. You never thought the man in 2A would be the one who owned the keys," Marcus finished for him. "You laughed at my professional conduct clause. Your lawyers called it woke HR nonsense. You thought it was a joke, but it was a gun. And you just taught one of your employees how to pull the trigger. She didn't just slap a passenger, Thomas. She slapped a man she assumed was powerless because he was black and because he was dressed in a hoodie. She assaulted me because your culture gave her permission." "We will change," Bishop pleaded, his voice cracking. "I swear it. I'll fire the board. I'll step down. Just save the company. Name your price." Marcus stood up. The meeting was over. "There is no company to save, and you still don't get it. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not suspending your license. The contract is terminated." Bishop's knees buckled. He grabbed the desk for support. "Terminated? What does that mean?" "It means I'm not turning it back on. Ever. You can find a new software provider. I hear the integration process takes about 18 to 24 months. You don't have 18 days. You're already dead. You just haven't stopped moving." Bishop, his face a mask of purple rage and terror, finally snapped. You can't. That's a death sentence. You're a monster. You're killing us." Marcus walked to the door and opened it. "No, Thomas. You killed yourselves. You just handed me the shovel." The next day, Velocity Air filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was a hopeful, futile gesture at reorganization. But the creditors, the banks that owned the planes, the airports that were owed gate fees, knew the truth. The planes were just 300-ton paperweights without the aerotech software to make them fly. They forced an immediate motion, liquidation. The empire of dust was being swept away. The final brutal twist came 2 days later. Marcus Thorne held a joint press conference with the CEO of Orion Air. He announced that Aerotech Solutions, in partnership with Orion Air, was launching the Compassionate Carrier Initiative. It was an emergency $500 million fund to absorb and hire, with seniority and pensions intact, up to 7,000 of the qualified professional former staff of Velocity Air. He wasn't just destroying the rot. He was saving the people who had been trapped inside it. The fall of Velocity Air was not a single event. It was a cascade, and the fallout settled on everyone in precise, proportional, and brutal measures. For the world that had watched the 48-second video, the question was what came next. The answer was karma, delivered with the cold, unfeeling efficiency of a corporate ledger. Karen Miller's day in Queens County Criminal Court was a masterclass in self-destruction. She had, against all legal advice, insisted on taking the stand. She saw this not as a trial, but as an appeal to the jury, to the world, to the common sense people she knew were on her side. I want people to know my side," she'd said, dabbing at dry eyes, her voice quivering with practiced victimhood. He was very threatening. He was non-compliant, and in my line of work, 25 years, non-compliance is a threat. I felt I was in danger. I was just doing my job. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman from the DA's office who had been waiting for a case this clean her entire career, simply smiled. She queued up Sarah Jensen's unedited 10-minute video on the courtroom's main screen. "Let's review your side, Mrs. Miller," the prosecutor said, her voice echoing in the silent room. She played the first part. "Here is the passenger, Mr. Chadwick, illegally and forcefully shoving his bag. And here is Mr. Thorne, politely asking him to stop. Is that threatening, in your professional opinion?" She played the next part. "And here you are, ma'am. You ignore the actual aggressor, Mr. Chadwick. You ignore the man in the correct seat. You walk directly to Mr. Thorne and escalate. Are you refusing to comply? People like you. Was that part of doing your job, Mrs. Miller, or was that prejudice?" His tone," Karen stammered. "His tone," the prosecutor interrupted. "Let's talk about your actions." She played the slap. She played it in slow motion. The crack of the impact echoed in the courtroom, just as it had on the plane. "At what point, exactly, were you in danger? The man was sitting down. You were standing over him. You were the authority, and you were the assailant, weren't you?" Karen Miller's mask of composure didn't just crack, it shattered. "He deserved it. He was arrogant. He thought he was better than me. She stopped. The courtroom was frozen. The admission, more potent than the slap itself, hung in the air. She hadn't been scared. She had been offended. The jury deliberated for 9 minutes. Guilty. Assault in the 3rd degree. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Angela Rios, was merciless in her sentencing. "Mrs. Miller, for 25 years, you wore a uniform that bestowed upon you a sacred trust. You were not just a server of drinks. You were a guardian of the sky, responsible for the safety and dignity of hundreds of souls. And you betrayed that trust. You were not a guardian. You were a bully. You used your authority not to protect, but to harm. You were the very rot that, when exposed, brought an entire company to its knees. You did not feel threatened. You felt entitled." Karen Miller received a sentence of 18 months, with a requirement to serve a minimum of 6. But the hard karma was only just beginning. Marcus Thorne's civil suit was a formality. His legal team, led by Ben Jacobs, filed for summary judgment. The damages? All $80 million that Velocity had owed Aerotech, plus punitive damages for the assault. The court, citing the now bankrupt airline's inability to pay, pierced the corporate veil and went after the 2 individuals responsible for the material breach, Thomas Bishop and Karen Miller. Karen's 25-year pension, which had been her golden parachute. Seized her 401k. Seized her house in New Jersey, which she couldn't pay for without a job. Foreclosed. The last image the world had of her was not a viral video, but a simple, grainy processing photo. Her signature blonde hair, which she had maintained with meticulous, expensive care, was now a mousy, unkempt brown. Her blue uniform, the source of all her power, was gone, replaced by a standard-issue, shapeless orange jumpsuit. She was no longer Karen Miller, senior flight attendant. She was inmate na José João Elephant Fork B. She had built her entire identity on a uniform, and in the end, she had simply traded one for another. If Karen's karma was a prison cell, Thomas Bishop's was a public cage. He was ruined. The shareholder lawsuits, piled a mile high, had targeted him personally. The SEC, investigating the $80 million delinquency, had charged him with misleading investors, a crime that carried prison time. He had traded his penthouse, his Gulf Stream, and his art collection for a high-priced criminal defense attorney who had, in the end, barely kept him out of jail. He was left with nothing. No golden parachute, no severance, no reputation. He was blacklisted from every boardroom in America. He was, like Karen, unemployable. Almost. 6 months after the fall of his empire, a small, blurry photo went viral on X, formerly Twitter. It was taken at DFW Airport. The location was soaked in irony. The very hub that Bishop had built, the one that had once borne his name on a plaque, was now a ghost town. The massive, gleaming Velocity Air Terminal was dark, its gates empty, its halls echoing. But down on the arrivals level, in the rental car bay, there was life. The photo was of the Hertz rental car counter. Behind it, looking diminished and grey, was Thomas Bishop. He was wearing an ill-fitting, mustard-yellow polyester polo shirt. A laminated name tag was pinned crookedly to his chest. Tom. The man who had once flown in a private jet to close billion-dollar deals was now asking tourists if they wanted to upgrade to a full-size sedan. One Tuesday, a woman in a sharp, dark blue suit approached his counter. He looked up, his eyes dead, and began his script. "Welcome to Hertz. How can I—" He froze. He knew her. It was Cynthia Reeves. She had been his VP of Human Resources. He had fired her just a year before the incident for wasting company money on soft skill crap and pushing that woke diversity nonsense. Her nonsense had been an attempt to fix the toxic culture. She had, in effect, tried to prevent the Karen Miller incident from ever happening. She was now, he knew, the Senior Vice President of People and Culture for Orion Air, hired personally by Marcus Thorne. "Reservation," she said, her voice cool and clear. "Under Reeves." Bishop's hands trembled as he typed. He couldn't meet her eyes. The humiliation was a physical, choking thing. He, the king, was now serving the woman he had cast out. A mid-size, he stammered. "Ford Focus." "That's fine," she said, tapping her credit card on the counter. He processed the transaction, his mind a vortex of rage and self-pity. He printed the receipt and grabbed the keys. "Would you?" He forced the words out, the final, ritual humiliation of the service worker. "Like to add the supplemental insurance?" Cynthia Reeves took the keys from his hand. She looked him dead in the eye, her face not triumphant, but simply, finally, level. "No, Thomas," she said, her voice quiet. "I don't need it. I'm fully covered." She walked away, her heels clicking on the tile, leaving him alone in his yellow-shirted prison, surrounded by the ghosts of his own dead empire. While the rot was being carved out, Marcus Thorne was building. The first thing he did was announce the Orion Air and Aerotech Compassionate Carrier Initiative. He held a press conference, not with CEOs, but with union leaders for pilots, mechanics, and gate agents. He announced that his new, exclusive partnership with Orion Air included a $500 million investment to absorb the qualified, professional, and compassionate former staff of Velocity Air. He, along with his new SVP Cynthia Reeves, held a massive, multi-city hiring fair. But it was an interview process unlike any other. They didn't just look at resumes, they cross-referenced them with Velocity's internal complaint files. The good pilots, the respected mechanics, the gate agents with glowing passenger reviews. They were hired on the spot, with seniority and pensions intact. The ones with a file full of Karen Miller moments, the bullies, the bigots, the petty tyrants. They were blacklisted. He didn't just destroy 10,000 jobs, He saved the 7,000 good people who had been trapped in a bad system, and he permanently removed the 3,000 who were the system. Sarah Jensen, the Jet Set Sarah vlogger, was on a stage of her own. She was standing on the iconic red circle of a TED Talk. Her speech, "The Power of the Witness," was already the platform's fastest-growing video of the year. "My phone didn't just capture an assault," she told the rapt audience. "It captured a symptom. It was the symptom of a corporate disease, the rot of a culture that told its employees that the customer was the enemy and that their own entitlement was a shield. What I learned," she said, "is that in the 21st century, the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the uniform or the one with the title. It's the one with the record button." She was now a lead investigative journalist for Wired, a job she'd been offered an hour after her video went viral. She no longer vlogged about budget travel. She wrote deep, scathing exposés on corporate accountability. 6 months after the incident, Marcus Thorne was in seat 2A again. He was on a brand-new Orion Air A350, flying to London to personally oversee the global launch of his new software, Aerotech Beacon. It was a system born from the incident, a real-time, encrypted incident reporting tool built into every crew member's tablet and every passenger's in-flight entertainment system. A passenger in row 4, a man with the same platinum entitlement as Chad from 6 months ago, was being loud. He was angry his specific brand of gin wasn't stocked. He was jabbing his finger at a young flight attendant. "What kind of airline is this? This is unacceptable. Get me your supervisor." The old way. The attendant would have to just stand there and take the abuse or escalate it into a conflict. The new way. The young flight attendant, a man who had been a Velocity employee hired through the initiative, calmly held up his tablet. "Sir, I understand your frustration. However, your volume is disturbing other passengers, and your language is non-compliant. I am logging this interaction in our beacon system." On his screen, the Aerotech Beacon logo glowed. "This is being reviewed in real time by an on-ground supervisor. Are you sure you wish to continue?" The passenger saw the logo. He knew the story. The entire world knew the story. He knew about Marcus Thorne. He knew about Karen Miller. He was suddenly acutely aware that he was on that airline, the one run by that guy. His face went from red to pale. "No," he muttered, sinking back into his seat. "No, I'll just have a water." The flight attendant nodded, turned, and as he passed Marcus's seat, his eyes met Marcus's. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, a nod of thanks, a nod of mutual respect. Marcus nodded back and returned to his work. He looked out the window at the perfect, blue horizon. He hadn't asked for that fight. He hadn't gone on that plane looking to destroy a company. But when the rot had finally, violently, broken the surface, he was ready. He'd done more than destroy an airline. He had cleared the sky, and from the ashes of Velocity, he had built something stronger, safer, and better. The world had learned a $4 billion lesson, one that would be taught in business schools for decades. Be kind, be professional, and always, always be careful who you slap. Because you never know if the man in 2A is the one who owns the keys to the kingdom. And that is what happens when systemic rot meets absolute power. Karen Miller thought her uniform made her a queen. Thomas Bishop thought his CEO title made him a king. They were both wrong. They forgot that in our hyper-connected world, you never ever know who you're talking to. The quiet man in 2A might just be the one who owns the entire system. His name was Marcus Thorne, and his 48-second call was the $4 billion consequence of a single, hateful act. What do you think? Was this the perfect karma Or was the collapse of the entire airline too harsh on the other employees? Let me know your honest opinion in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, do me a solid and smash that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. I drop new stories of wild karma and real-life drama every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Thanks for listening.